And by the way, why are they so unattractive? I really legitimately want to know. Why are all the protesters so homely? I don't think they're unconnected. I'm not going to lie. I think attractive, smart people are not drawn to this nonsense. They're living their lives being successful. It's the unattractive and or dumb people who feel the need to do this to feel like they matter. Sorry.
Imagine
A podcast.
where time drifts slowly,
A podcast.
Where
Isaac
carries you away.
So let me be clear. We tortured some folks.
This is one of the more peculiar reasons why the protests are bad. There's no one at the protests I want to have sex with. That seems to be an excuse not to support these campus protests happening throughout the country. Yeah, they're not hot enough. As if they would have sex with anybody who would be so diametrically opposed to their own politics. It's a weird psychosexual fantasy here, and I would suggest they read Wilhelm Reich if they want to figure out why that is. I'm seeing lots of excuses about the protests. A lot of nitpicking. Oh, that's not the way I would do it. Well, what are you doing? The fuck are you doing? Nothing? Then probably you should shut up. And then there are people who will find any reason not to support the protests or to find a reason to continue the genocide in Gaza. I was chatting with this one girl on Instagram who I know barely personally, but I tried to express to her in the most simple terms possible that this wasn't nuanced. There is no nuance in the genocide. And I tried to say it as simply as possible that I am against the murder of children. And I felt like that was something, like a foundation we could possibly agree upon. That killing kids is bad. And I've heard a lot of Zionist propaganda throughout my whole life, but I'd never heard this one before. This is, I was actually really blown away by this logic, this reasoning coming from this girl. She said, and I quote, "I don't think it's right to kill children, but that's not a black and white argument either." She asked me, "Are you pro-life or pro-choice? If you're pro-choice, like myself, then you're for the killing of babies under certain circumstances." Wow. There are so many reasons to be upset by that. The first being that, yes, I'm pro-choice, but if I thought that abortion was the killing of babies, I would not be pro-choice. Also, it's at least in abortion, it's the choice of the mother. I don't think that that's what's happening in Palestine. So while we litigate the protests here in this country, the genocide continues, the bombing of Rafah. While Biden may have gently suggested that the United States would cut off military aid to Israel, he quickly backed off on that. And not that it mattered anyway. They have all the weapons they need. Right? So nothing but solidarity for the protesters. You can have your criticisms of them, but anybody who's willing to put themselves on the gears of the machine, God bless. I will not judge you. I will even defend the people who went to the Capitol on January 6th. While they did it for the dumbest reasons possible, at least they did something. I don't think that storming the Capitol is necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on the reasons why you do it. I think that in the case of an act of genocide, storming the Capitol would be a good thing. Like we should do that. Just, I'm not gonna do it to the FBI guy listening to my podcast. I wonder how many FBI guys they have assigned to me. Flattering myself here. No, if you believe in something it is so wrong, then why not? Putting a sign out in your front lawn saying how open and welcome your house is, well, nobody's in there, I guess, except for you, doesn't really help. And please don't tell me to fucking vote. For who? Who do I vote for here? So, I'm ashamed I'm not at the protests myself. I should be there. So don't let me tell you what to do exactly. But still, I want to know more. I want to understand. And so I thought I would invite an old family friend on the show, Stephen Schafer. Stephen is a retired public defender who served in Vietnam and was there for both the original Columbia University protests in 1968 and 1970. And he came on the show to talk about how today's protests are different and similar. We recorded the show at Stephen's place out in Mayaca, which is a great little bit of what's left of old Florida. And so you'll hear lots of wild noises, a lot of birds, and a couple of troublemaking raccoons that were biting my toes at some emotionally serious moments. So I wasn't being rude. I was being bit by raccoons. Not complaining. It was really fun. And as always, remember Aaron Bushnell, whose actions today seem less and less crazy, right? I got to get you sounding like NPR, They cheat. They make their correspondents sound a lot more, I don't know how I would describe them, not manly, but sultry than they really are. Yeah, they really picks up that timbre.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do that, but you can do it for me. So.
I'll auto-tune you or something like that. Go. And for the listener who hears a lot of either prop jets and squirrels and birds, it's because we're sitting out here in your lanai out in Mayaca, Florida. I'm joined today by Mr. Stephen Schafer, a man I've known pretty much my whole life, right? I mean, do you remember me when I was a kid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and your sister both. Very, very small. Well, 6 or something like that.
Yeah. And you used to work with my father at the public defender's office here in Sarasota.
No.
No.
I worked in Manatee.
Manatee.
And your dad was in Manatee, too.
Okay.
And it's kind of funny because when he came up there, I was his boss. And then he became my boss.
How'd that go?
I don't think it made any difference to either of us.
Yeah.
Which, but it's just sort of ironic.
My dad always used to talk about stories that you told him that could be apocryphal, but that you were in Vietnam.
Yes.
And the reason I wanted to have you on the show today in particular was because not only did you serve in Vietnam, but you were at the original Columbia protests.
I was at both of them because the one in 70 too. But it's funny. I was talking to my brother this morning. I don't remember 70 much. I think I might have even left. But anyway, my brother and I both were there throughout the 68 riots or fiasco, whatever.
We just got breaking news on the show that Columbia University announced that it would be canceling its main commencement ceremony after weeks of student protests. Steve's wife Jean just came in and wanted to let us know. So yes, this is very topical. And have you been keeping up with the current protests?
Not really. I have been talking to my brother because we were there together. We were reminding each other of various incidents and various the chronology of the whole thing. Because it got quite complicated. There were a whole bunch of different aspects of it that affected us and affected everybody there on campus. But they, of course, canceled classes in '68 and the commencement and everything else.
They're still, I believe that they're still doing classes at Columbia now.
Mm-hmm.
But let's rewind a little bit and get into the history of your time at Columbia and in Vietnam. So when did you go to Vietnam?
There are all these coincidences. My brother's birthday was February 26th, and I enlisted in the Marine Corps in February 26th of 1963.
And how you were how old?
I was 17.
You were 7. You were allowed to enlist at 17?
Yeah, no, I was 18.
You were 18.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why'd you enlist?
Because they were going to make me a man. I saw it on the poster.
Yeah.
It said, I had flunked out of college. I went to Pledge Week and went to a lot of parties, to various fraternity things, and never went to class. And sort of during the midterms, first semester, I realized that, I wasn't going to make it. So I just quit. I drove a truck for a while, and then went in the Marine Corps. I enlisted. I don't know why.
Well, you were a kid, so
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. And for how long were you in Vietnam?
Off and on for 16 months. Part of that time was on a ship, though, going in circles in the Gulf of Tonkin. This was after the Turner Joy Maddox incidents, the destroyers in the Gulf of Tonkin, when it was said that those patrol boats attacked them. And from all I've heard from various veterans is we attacked them. But, who knows what happened.
Well, you're talking to someone who proudly calls himself a conspiracy theorist, so I'm happy to believe that the story that we were told wasn't the true one. So I don't know how much you want to talk about your time in Vietnam, because I imagine it was quite harrowing.
Yeah, I was in boot camp at Parris Island, and they give you a number of tests, and I evidently tested well. So they wanted me to go to helicopter school as a pilot, become a pilot. But I enlisted for 3 years, and they wanted me to sign up for another 3 years before they'd send me in for helicopter pilots training. And I said no. I didn't want. I realized within about 24 hours of getting to Parris Island that I'd made a serious error in judgment. And it wanted out. But because I refused that, they put me in the infantry. They used to put, troublemakers or people that didn't quite fit in. They put them in the infantry, and a lot of African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Because my units when I was in the infantry were half black, and that doesn't represent the population of the United States by any means, and not the Marine Corps either. I went to we spent 3 months in Vietnam early, guarding a radio station. It was like like the one that goes into Cuba. I've forgotten the name of it.
Radio Free or
yeah.
the Voice of America thing.
Yeah, it was something like that they used to broadcast into North Vietnam and also parts of South Vietnam, and we went in to guard that. During that 3 months, the only casualty we had was one of the cooks was running into town to get some food supplies and got a sniper round through the windshield, and it scared him, and he ran into a tree and wrecked the Jeep and broke his arm, or maybe broke his leg. I don't remember. He broke one of his appendages, and that was the only injury we had during that 3 months. And then I went back again. And I was there for 9 months in the infantry, and that was a very, very different experience. I was extended involuntarily for 4 months too, because they needed troops at that point, because that was 65, and that was when they first started expanding the numbers. And so I got an involuntary extension, and during that extension, we were on a patrol, company-sized patrol, and we were basically overrun. I was on a listening post, which means I was 100 yards out in front of the company with 3 other guys, and we were supposed to notify the company if anybody came in, but we we were in a small area that had a bunch of banana trees and a raised area slightly. There was a hooch there that someone had lived in at one point, and we were on one side of that, and a machine gun nest set up on the other side of it. They were only 30 feet from us, and we didn't even hear them. I think that when you're on a listening post, 2 people sleep, 2 people stay awake.
Mm-hmm.
I think the 2 guys that were supposed to be awake went to sleep is what happened. But then the company got mortared. A bunch of mortar rounds came in, and that machine gun opened up, and I killed a gunner. Actually, I think I killed 2 gunners, because the machine gun, you could see the flashes, and you could see the person behind it, and I shot him. And then they started. So there were a bunch of people. They started coming down toward us, and we were. I shot somebody. I was lying in the paddy, watching them, and they were coming toward me, and I had to lift my rifle up and shoot this guy in the crotch. That's how close he was, and Rodriguez was behind me. He shot several people, and. Then things calmed down a little bit, and then we started hearing splashes, and they were throwing grenades at us. We threw 1 or 2 back, but Rodriguez, I guess, counted the somehow he knew that there was another one by us, and he pushed me down. And then when it went off, it took a hunk of my scalp off and blew his eardrums out, so it was kind of funny, because by that point they were shooting in flares out of the 105 howitzers. They were shooting flares in so we could see what was going on in the company, because the company had gotten overrun, and so we knew that there were no more, we used to call them gooks, but there were no more Viet Cong or whatever they were, South Vietnamese, I don't know who they were, but I had this blood pouring down my face, and I couldn't see it. What was in my eyes, and Rodriguez couldn't hear because he had blood coming out of his ears, and he grabbed my hand, and we ran across the patio trying to get back into the company because I didn't know where I was. I couldn't. Anyway, we got back into the company, and where we came back into the lines, everybody had been killed. There were just bodies there. It was a bad night. I got medevaced out, and you know, it was just a bad night, and they sent me back out a week or so later, back out to my company, and I fell asleep every time I got shot at. My brain just wouldn't handle it anymore. I just lay down and went to sleep, and I didn't care where I was. I'd lie down on one of the rice paddy dikes, but I was not. And they sent me back to the psychiatric ward, of course, and they sent me home from there.
What year was that?
66. It was March of 66. I was supposed to get out in February, so I was on that extension. It was March of 66. So I ended up with a Bronze Star and a Purple Heart from that night. I don't need to go on with that anymore. But when I got back to the States, I really had no idea what to do with myself. I got another job driving a truck for some construction company, and then my father, who was dean of Teachers College at Columbia, told me about General Studies, which was a program they had there, and you could go to classes, and as long as you got maintained a B average, you could stay. And so that's where I went to college, is at Columbia General Studies. My brother Emmett was at Columbia College. He'd gotten accepted to Columbia College. And that was in 66, is when I started, September of 66, and then I was there through the 70s, 1970, and went through the two riots, demonstrations, whatever you call them, at Columbia, where they shut down the university twice, where I helped to shut down the university twice.
How were you treated as a Vietnam vet by the hippies and the college kids? Because there's always that story that I doubt its veracity, but let me know if you've experienced that Vietnam vets were spit on when they returned to the States.
I was spit on in California when I first got back.
Yeah.
I also I got off the base in San Diego. Of course, went to a bar and got pretty drunk and got rolled and ended up.
What's getting rolled?
I was beaten up and robbed, and I ended up getting arrested for vagrancy because the cops came. I didn't have any money. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I got arrested for vagrancy. And I ended up, actually it was in Orange County, which is a very wealthy place. In
Laguna.
Yeah. And so when I went to court the next morning, I told the judge I don't have any money. They wanted to fine me $25. I didn't have it, so I spent 5 days on the road gang. and that was my welcome home.
Oh man. So both sides, both the institution and the people,
Yeah.
weren't terribly kind.
No, not at all. And it's that was early, and where people hadn't gotten worked up either. I mean, it was.
There was still a lot of support for the war effort.
Yeah, in '65. I mean, it went downhill quickly from there, but there was some support. But there were also people that were real antagonistic to the Camp Pendleton was there. It was a base, Marine Corps base there in Oceanside, which is just south of Orange County, and the people did not like the Marines, and we all had shaved heads, or basically shaved heads, so they knew who we were.
Mm-hmm.
And the surfers had much longer hair, and it was a very different kind of population, and we were not appreciated before or after we had gone to Vietnam. When I was at Columbia, I didn't tell people I was a veteran. There was an organization, Vietnam Vets Against the War, that I finally got involved with when I was there. And I drove to various universities, I can't even remember which ones, and delivering propaganda for the organization. That's all I did. I did not sort of publicize the fact that I was in the organization or
Was it out of?
I was ashamed of what I'd done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there was a video of a Marine with a Zippo lighting a hooch on fire, and it was shown on a lot of the national news things about us burning down a village. That was my company. I mean, I was not proud of what I did. I killed a bunch of people. Anyway, at Columbia, I went to classes and I drank a lot and I partied a lot and
Did you keep that B average?
yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I don't know how or why, but I do know, like history. I hated history. I didn't like the professor. It was early in the morning, and so I dropped it. And I did that a lot. I'd start off with 16, 17 credit hours, and I'd end up with 12 because I would just drop things that I wasn't doing well in order to keep the B average.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some classes that I really liked. I got an A in organic chemistry. It made sense to me, and I liked it. But I did not do well. Languages, I was terrible at languages, and yet you had to do 2.5 years of language to get a degree from Columbia. That's because they had a bunch of. They taught Uzbek. They taught. The language department was a very powerful group.
Interesting.
At Columbia. And you had to take 2 years and then a year of literature in the language. I went to summer school at the University of Vermont and took Russian literature. And Columbia never knew it, but it was in English. It was not in Russian. And that's the only way I graduated.
It's funny hearing that now, considering what colleges require of you today.
Yeah.
And the idea that you would learn, you would read Russian literature in Russian at most colleges today. I doubt it. I doubt that they would have you do that. Yeah, but it also cost. I mean, what did it cost you to go to school at that point? I mean, did you get any benefits from being a veteran or your father's employment there? Or
Okay, I got married my second year of college, and the reason was because I was getting like $120 a month from the VA because of my time. And when I got married, I got an extra $40 a month. So that's why I got
it's a
married.
business decision.
Yeah. And my father-in-law gave us $1,000 to buy an apartment because you had to buy rent-controlled apartments in Manhattan in those days.
Mm.
So yeah, it was.
Hearing that just is consider how much you can't even find an apartment like a 4-bedroom roommate apartment for $1,000 in New York anymore. And we're talking like not Manhattan. We're talking like Brownsville. So how much was your time in Vietnam? Like it was a waking like an everyday like waking nightmare for you even after you returned. I mean, like
The 9 months that I was there on that last stretch was, well, I mean, it was god awful. We got shot at every day, and the lieutenants we had were very green and didn't know what they were doing. It was the first week I was there. My lieutenant, there were 3 squads in the platoon. I was a squad leader. I didn't get picked, thank God. But the other 2 squads were told to go on ambush patrol. And it was about a mile out from where we were set up. There was a place where they were supposed to ambush. And on one squad goes to one side of the hill, the other squad goes to the other side of the hill and set up an ambush. And so the lieutenant didn't tell the 3rd squad that the 1st squad was out there. And with the old maps and the hand compasses we had in the middle of the night, you didn't know where the hell you were anyway. So, of course, the 3rd squad ambushed the 1st squad, killed a couple of, it was just absolutely asinine. That kind of, the lieutenants, until they'd had some experience there, they did things like that, but it killed us. It didn't, Anyway, it was not a happy experience. Sometimes I think about it. At Camp Lejeune, the groundwater was so polluted that people are still getting cancer from it. And there's a suit now going on, and many of the Marines that were there are suing, and there was a law passed that allowed us to sue because everybody was getting lymphoma and various other kinds of cancer.
This is from Agent Orange? Or
No, it's from cleaning solvents and such that they were using at the base in North Carolina.
Oh my God.
And then I go to Vietnam, and when we went out on patrol, we went through jungle areas that had been sprayed or had Agent Orange dumped on them. So we had this stuff dripping on us as we were going on patrols. They tried to kill us when they sent us on ambush patrols. They tried to kill us with the Agent Orange. I mean, it was it was crazy, and it was it was not a pleasant experience. But I still think every day I think about Vietnam. It's just. You don't get over that kind of thing. You just don't. And anybody that says they did get over it is an ass, is an idiot.
So when the nation started to come to it, I don't call it come to its senses, but started to oppose the war, and you were on Columbia, and in '68 the big protests started happening. Was this before or after Kent State?
Kent State, I believe, was after.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. I'm not sure I remember. I do remember that Martin Luther King was assassinated about 2 weeks before the Columbia strike. And the Columbia thing started with a very small group. You know, you don't see it. You can read articles about that demonstration or riot, whatever you call it. And one of the major reasons that it started was the research that they were doing at Columbia. And they were doing it at Harvard. They were doing it at Yale. They were doing it all over the country. The Defense Department wanted certain kinds of research done. And so they would put out these contracts to various universities. But if you took a contract, the stipulation was you would not reveal a single thing about your research. Your research would be classified. The whole idea of a university is to bring people together to exchange knowledge and to learn from each other and to use that knowledge to spread out through society. And these people are getting contracts from the Pentagon and doing this classified research and then keeping it, of course, to themselves. The original, there was a demonstration by about 6 people, Mark Rudd being one of them, is the only one I remember. But it was came out of SDS, the Students for the Democratic Society, and they were complaining about this research. And then they were suspended, I believe. They were disciplined for the demonstration. And that's one of the reasons that there was a small demonstration. The sundial was right in the middle of the campus, right in front of that. You see the statue of the woman holding the torch, sitting in the chair sometimes is at Columbia. She's looking at the sundial, it's right there. There was a small demonstration there that started this whole thing. And the demonstration was complaining about the fact that those guys, 6 of them I think, had been disciplined for complaining about the classified research that was done. And from there, somebody said, well, let's continue this down at the gymnasium. Columbia got a contract with the mayor or the city council of Manhattan to use some of Morningside Park to build a gym. And Morningside Park is one of the very few parks in Harlem. So what they were saying was, we don't give a damn about your park or you're having a park. We need a gymnasium, and we're going to build a gym down there. And they said, but we're going to let the community use it. We're going to let the community come in they can come in the door in the basement, and we'll use all the floors above that. And so we're allowing the community. It was like, it was like the water fountains that you see for segregation. I mean, anyway, they went down there and they got into a fight with some police down there. They had a big cyclone fence, and as they went down, they gathered more people, and when they got down there were a couple hundred people down there. And that's what started the whole thing. And then they came back up because the police had run them off. And somebody said Hamilton Hall is open. So they went and occupied Hamilton Hall. That's where I got involved in it. I lived in a building with a couple of guys on 112th Street. And I was at home. I was at 112th Street, and one of the guys that lived there came in, he was furious. He was furious. He said, those bastards have taken over Hamilton Hall. My Chaucer seminar is in there. I can't go to my Chaucer seminar.
It's like one of the fruitiest things I've
And
ever heard.
he had a dozen eggs, and he went through the eggs at Hamilton Hall because they were occupying the thing to protest
the protesters.
the protesters because they
My
canceled
Chaucer.
this Chaucer
My
seminar.
Chaucer.
He was a graduate student in English, but Tom Kennedy. Anyway, that's how I first heard about it. That's how, and I wandered up there to see what was going on, you know. Hamilton Hall. I don't know how familiar you are, but Hamilton Hall. It was kind of funny. In the Marines in Vietnam, the infantry was about half black, and the numbers were way skewed. You know, you get put in a foxhole with somebody, your life depends on that person. And you don't give a rat's ass who he is. You just want him to stay awake when he's supposed to stay awake. And you know, you might have been in there with a Chinese. I mean, there was no discrimination, no animosity even when you were in the field, because the guy next to you, your life depended on him.
Mm-hmm.
But when we got back to the base, when we went back to Da Nang, and we were on guard duty around the air base there, you could go into town. You get liberty once in a while, not often, but once in a while. You go into town. There were black bars, there were white bars, there were, you know, it was completely segregated, not by law but by choice. And that always struck me as odd. Hamilton Hall became the black. It wasn't SNCC. It was an organization similar to SDS. SDS was for the white guys, and this was for the black guys. And but they kicked us out. The blacks took over Hamilton Hall, and that was their center. And we had to go. That's why we went to Low Library. Low Library was the president's office and sort of the center of the campus. And Hamilton stayed as this black center, and the white center was Low Library. Other buildings were taken over too, but and the demands of the people in Hamilton were slightly different than the demands of the people at Low Library. Hamilton was much angrier about the gym and much angrier about the fact that Columbia was taking over all kinds of buildings around the campus and kicking out the more economically challenged, whatever the word is that you use, the people in the community.
So it wasn't exactly about Vietnam then at that point for them.
No, it was not as much about Vietnam as the white folks the people in Low Library had to worry about the draft. The draft played a big role in the demonstrations about the Vietnam War. And you know, these things are never. The number one demand was a pardon. It wasn't called a pardon, but it was excusing those 6 or 8 people who originally got disciplined for demonstrating against the classified research. That was the number one demand. And that was not one of the things that the people in Hamilton Hall cared about. What they cared about was the community, the gym, and those issues.
Fair.
And they also, you know, Vietnam was on the list of their demands, but it was down. It was not a paramount concern. And Colombia had all kinds of plans. And you look at a map of Colombia now, God, it's huge compared to what it was then. It's 5 times bigger.
Well, modern colleges today, especially private institutions, are basically just corporations now. They're businesses. So property expansion makes a lot of financial sense for these companies.
Well, Manhattan, I think you'll find the Catholic Church, Columbia, and a couple of institutions like that are the largest landowners on Manhattan. And they're all tax-free. I know the church is. I don't know about Columbia, but I think it is. I think it's as a nonprofit kind of,
Non-profit, quote
Yeah,
unquote.
quote,
Yeah. Same with the church.
Yeah.
So it starts off, you just kind of see something interesting, or like your Chaucer roommate sounds like an asshole, and you're like, oh, check out what he's saying. And how long was the protest at Columbia?
About 10 days before the cops came in.
What was that like when the cops came? How were they?
They were brutal, but they had kid gloves for Hamilton, and that was always they were very well, because Harlem's right there, and it was only a couple of weeks before that Harlem had exploded because of the Martin Luther King assassination. The mayor was very, very worried. I can't remember his name. Begins with an L. The mayor back then. Was very worried that if the cops went in and beat heads of the blacks in Hamilton, that Harlem would explode again. So
they got to take it out on you guys instead.
Yeah. Well, the other thing they did, it was something like a SWAT team. It wasn't called a SWAT team. It was a tactical thing. They had school buses all lined up all up and down Broadway. They brought in, probably a couple of thousand of these people, these cops.
And how many of them were there of you guys?
Well, there were 700 people arrested, approximately. But what happened is they wanted to keep the numbers down of those people who were arrested. So when it finally came down to when the cops did come in, they came in the middle of the night. I'd left the little library. I mean, I can talk about that in a minute, but when I heard that the cops were going to come in again, I went running back up to the campus because I wanted to go into one of the buildings. But the buildings had all been barricaded from the inside. They wouldn't let us in. Because there were a whole bunch of people that came up solely to be arrested. And there were about 20 of us sitting in front of one of the doors of one of the buildings that was occupied. And when the cops came up, and they just bashed heads and kicked at the people up there, dragged us off. They didn't arrest any of us. And I mean, we were sitting there arm in arm, trespassing, and they had the bullhorn. They said, "You people have to leave, or we're going to arrest you." They didn't arrest us. They took a lot of the people that they took out of the buildings. They didn't arrest them. They turned them loose. They beat the shit out of them, but they didn't. They were.
I think a lot of the cops were vets as well.
I don't know. The cops sat up there for 4 or 5 days in these buses, and just having to look at the students and the long hair and they were thinking the students were a bunch of spoiled brats, and they were really pissed off at them. And because they had to sit there and look at the whole thing and see that some of the, like at Low Library, there were 3 lines. There were the people that were in the library, and then there was a ring of teachers, faculty, professors around. And then outside of them were the jocks counter-protesting, and the faculty.
It all sounds very familiar.
The faculty was there to protect us. They didn't want to see.
Did the faculty get beat up at all, you think? Or?
Well, when the police came in, they beat up everybody. It was not. There was no distinctions made. There were a couple of faculty members were seriously injured, and a lot of the people that were counter-protested got the shit kicked out of them because they were on campus.
And the cops couldn't distinguish?
No, they couldn't tell. I mean,
Well, they seem to be doing a really good job coordinating on these campuses today. They seem to know who's who.
Well, and they're and they've been schooled a lot better too. The police, in terms of what looks good and what doesn't look good, because the cops that came in, they were a tactical force. They were trained to handle riots and to handle people then were very worried about riots. They just had a huge one in Harlem. I think the police just thought of us as spoiled brats, and we just needed to get spanked. So they went around spanking us. Here comes the coons.
So to kind of reflect on it a little bit, in your mind, were you protesting the war, or were you protesting these other list of demands that were going on?
As I said, I think before we started this, my father was dean of Teachers College, Columbia Teachers College, and he and I talked a lot about the whole thing, and not while it was going on, but in the years after it. And I'd say most of the faculty believed that universities should not do classified research, that universities should be open, that it was against the whole idea of a university to do classified research. So in that sense, they supported us. I think a lot of people at that point, the very educated people, a lot of those people were opposed to the war. There were, of course, some conservatives. There are always there are two sides of an issue, so there are always people on both sides. But I think a lot of the faculty supported us. And I think that there were a lot of different reasons for people protesting. A lot of people were worried about the draft. They were doing the lottery then, and people were getting numbers, and that was pretty scary to some people.
But you'd already served. You couldn't get drafted again.
No, I couldn't get drafted again, but my brother Emmett could.
Yeah.
He returned his draft card October 15th. There were about 1,200 people that sent their draft cards back to their draft boards and said, "Fuck you, we're not going anywhere. We're not." And then I went down to some place in New Jersey where his draft board was when he was called in for his physical, and I went down with my father to support him when he said, "Screw you, I'm not dealing with this." Of course, he was listed as I don't know, as 1A or A1, but he was listed as eligible even without taking a physical because he refused induction. And the FBI, we lived on the 5th floor walk-up, and the FBI would come by, and they had that intercom system, they push the button. "This is the FBI, this is Special Agent Dickhead, and we want to speak to Emmett Schafer." And so I'd push the button and say, "Come on up." Push the button, and they'd come walk up the 5 flights. I'd open the door and say, "He's not home." Just, I just like screwing with him. But he got, investigated and hassled. But there were a whole bunch of different feelings than people felt. There was a Vietnam Veterans Against the War chapter at Columbia at that point.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't many people in it, but there were a few. Me. But there were a lot of Barnard students involved, and that was the women's college, of course. And because they didn't have to worry about the draft. So there were a whole lot of reasons. I think that the assassination of Mr. King affected a lot of people.
Yeah, 68 was a fucking crazy year. That was one of the crazier ones, right?
Yeah, it was insane. I think that was when Robert Kennedy was killed. Yeah, I mean the good Robert Kennedy, the sane one. Yeah, it was a crazy time, and people were very frustrated, and people, well, in Low Library, you got all these students, all these guys protesting, and they wanted to sit around and talk about the utopia that they were going to put together, and they thought of the group in there as a commune, and they called it a commune.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about, the rules and how they'd have participatory democracy and how they'd, all this stuff. And that's what prompted me to bring in the game Risk, to a little humor, a little levity to the situation. And nobody would play. Nobody would play with me. So I left. I mean, they took themselves extremely seriously, and some
bunch of nerds, basically, or
well-meaning nerds,
but nerds nonetheless.
But nerds.
Yeah. Again, another thing that hasn't changed very much since then.
No,
it hasn't.
I watched my platoon sergeant rape a 12-year-old. I think she was. I should have shot him, but I didn't. But I had seen enough horrendous stuff that I didn't, I just couldn't take it that seriously. I just.
So it wasn't. I wondered if having gone through that nightmare in Vietnam, and then being able to, voice your opposition to it would be cathartic, but was it? No.
No. No.
What would have been cathartic? I don't
know.
Nothing.
I mean, like I said, I still think about Vietnam every day. I still get emotional when I start thinking about it. I get, killing another human being is something that you can't explain how that feels, and you can't. And I didn't kill one. I killed, I think 13 people, and when I went to the hospital, when I got the shrapnel in the head, I carried stretchers that night because the company got overrun. There were a bunch. I carried stretchers in the hospital, and these are people that I knew, and they had their legs blown off, and their arms blown off, and one guy had both legs and an arm blown off, and you one day I killed a child. I didn't mean to. She came around a corner, and I had a grenade launcher, and I fired the grenade launcher, and it takes a while to get there. But it killed her. It didn't kill her mother, but it killed her. And you think about that kind of thing, you know. But people feel very differently about that. I went to a Vietnam veterans group one time, and I said at one of the meetings, I said, you know, sometimes I feel like going back to Vietnam and doing building some houses, doing the, what's the thing Jimmy Carter does at the house?
The Habitat for Humanity.
The Habitat.
Sorry, the raccoons are attacking me right now. Ouch. Okay.
And one of the guys said, if you want to do something for Vietnam, go buy a pair of sneakers, you know?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, well, that's what, that's some people feel that way.
I guess everyone has their own sort of moral coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and he was in a group of Vietnam veterans that had psychological problems. And guess where they came from? But that was his coping mechanism. But we,
we're bring it back to Columbia. Were the demands met? I mean, did no?
Now the gym didn't get built.
So the Hamilton folks got their way.
Well, that was also the 6 guys that were protesting about the secret research.
Mm-hmm.
They were all white, and they went down to the gym. The gym was something that sort of united people because it was such a blatant discriminatory behavior. I mean, it was they took a chunk of that park because they could, because it was just Negroes that went to that park, and that incensed enough people that I think that was one of the number one priorities for people.
Mm-hmm.
And it sort of evolved into other things. But the secret research and the gym were the first 2 things. And then I never did see Rudd's list of, they had about 10 or 12 demands that they made. They were.
And then to speed forward a bit through history, you were at the 72 protest?
70.
The 70 protest at Columbia. How different was that then? I mean, the country was probably a lot more anti-war at that point.
Yeah, it was a lot more clean cut, but they were still doing the research for the Pentagon. So,
and I'm sure that's still going on to this day.
Well, it's the money. It's a source of money. Moat Marine takes a bunch of money from the phosphate mines.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, and I love how, so that they get to be all mealy-mouthed when it comes to red tide.
Yeah.
Well, we're not exactly sure.
Yeah.
We shouldn't point fingers.
Yeah. They're incredible.
It's
but that's what money does,
Yeah. You did, however, get to see the Grateful Dead perform in 70.
Yeah.
So that's a silver lining, right?
And twice at the campus one time,
Yeah.
and down at Central Park one time because they gave a free concert there too. Yeah, they were very supportive. And at Hamilton Hall there were a whole bunch of people that came. Dignitaries, African American dignitaries that came to support them, and they got a lot of that kind of support. Whereas I don't recall that kind of support for the white folks, which I always found kind of interesting. It was very nice to see that unified front for the blacks, but it also pointed out to me how absent luminaries were on our side. Where are you? It's I think a lot of people felt that we were just spoiled brats.
So looking back on the Columbia protests, I mean, do you look at them with pride, fondly, or kind of mixed feelings?
Woodstock is supposed to be the symbol of my generation, the greatness of my generation. It was a bunch of hippies listening to music in a muddy field. I mean, I don't see that I was supposed to go to Woodstock, and we went down to the park and played touch football instead. But I'm more proud of what happened at Columbia than I am at the fact that Woodstock happened. At least we tried to do something.
Right. It wasn't peace and love. It was getting your head kicked in by a cop for what was right.
What we felt was right. Yeah.
Yeah. There are a lot of interesting conspiracy theories about how the hippie spiritual acid philosophies of the 60s was a government psyop to distract you from the actual violence going on, being like, nah, man, it's peace and love, instead of like rising up and fighting your own government.
Yeah. No, there was some fighting the government going on then.
So I know you haven't followed the current Columbia protests too closely, but do you see any corollaries there? What differences do you see? The raccoons are just wreaking havoc right now. I can already see that going bad. So,
Yeah.
what? We can pause it. It adds for interesting ambiance. I want to know what your thoughts are on the current protests going on and how you can compare them to the ones you experienced.
Well, I think that some of the civil rights demonstrations, some of the things that happened at Columbia, some of the things that were done to us as protesters have taught the powers that be to be gentle when they try to disrupt. I think that a lot of the protesters, when they move the tents and when they move the thing, they try to do it reasonably. And I think, I hate to be cynical, but I think that may have been the only thing that the powers that be learned, is that they don't want to get bad publicity. So they're more careful in the way they treat demonstrators. I think that's true. Now, that's sure as hell not true with the Israelis and some of the ways that they treat demonstrators, and some of the European.
Yeah, I've seen the stuff in Germany, which is crazy.
Germany, yeah, the water cannons, and then it's.
But I've been seeing. There's a lot of media complicity in all this, which is also nothing new. But I have seen instances of pretty significant violence. I mean, there was one video of cops just firing rubber bullet shotguns in protesters' faces, just point blank, basically. Yeah. But I haven't seen, so I guess they did learn, and it seems like a lot of the violence that they get to tactically make sense for them is to allow these counter-protesters to beat the fuck out of the protesters and just not stop them.
That at Columbia there was that ring of basically jocks,
frat boys, and we saw. I don't know if you.
Come on.
I don't know if you saw that. The frat boys who in UCLA in particular, I think it was Pi Kappa Phi or something like that. $400,000 were raised on the internet to throw them a party for fucking with the protesters. It turned out, though, however, that the fund that they raised was a scam, and they scammed, and it wasn't for the frat. So it was looked.
Well, that's great.
Well, but except it was for Israeli money laundering. It's all very funny stuff. But yeah, you see a lot of people. I am for the protesters, even if like it's disorganized and sometimes it's a little embarrassing the way they speak. God, this raccoon is. And so I see people using these excuses of being like the same. They're spoiled brats. They don't know what they're talking about. Finding reasons not to support the protesters. The raccoon is trying to chew the microphone wire right now.
We're going to have to stop for a minute. At Columbia, there were those three rings, kind of. There was us in the middle, then the faculty, then the jocks. And they always called us the pukes.
The pukes?
The pukes. There were the pukes and the jocks and the faculty there. But I'll say one thing for the jocks. They usually had a sense of humor. At one point, I don't know where this came from, but they were all out there chanting, "Save the popsicle sticks! Save the popsicle sticks!" It had
what does that mean?
I don't know. It had some significance, but it was trying to point out how trivial some of the stuff that we were doing was.
People are finding lots of reasons to dismiss these protests, albeit I think the big difference between the protests of Vietnam and these current protests about Gaza is that there are no claims of anti-Semitism, I assume. Like were people?
I don't know.
No, yeah, I wouldn't think so. So now,
Well,
yeah, it's
you were in New York, and there was a high percentage of Jewish people both at Barnard and at Columbia. And my roommate, Dick Scheinman, for a while, I didn't even know he was Jewish.
Sounds like a Jew.
Yeah, but because it didn't,
right,
because it was so much. But I used to go to this one place to get cigarettes because I smoked. Tattoo. He was a Jew from the camps and had the tattoo. That was always gave me sort of a chill.
Yeah.
Because you talk about Vietnam, Jesus Christ, what those people went through in those camps, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and I imagine what the people are going through in Gaza right now. I mean, like you were saying, the stuff that you went through, you think about every day. I mean, just the Palestinians will not be wiped off the face of earth. A lot of them are going to die, but the ones who will survive will remember, and I just can't imagine what it's like to live with that every single fucking day.
Well, and I think you're going to get a lot of martyrs, too.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you don't give anybody a prospect of a future, what do you think they're going to do?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't begrudge them. I wouldn't begrudge them at all. But I actually think that the Palestinians are a holy people because of the hell that they've been through for 80 plus years, and the fact that I don't think most of them want revenge. I think that they're actually above it all in a lot of ways. I mean, you're going to get some people who,
Of course.
yeah, and I don't begrudge people violence, but I always tell people when they say, well, if they provide a two-state solution, they're gonna, if you open the gates, they're gonna just go in and kill Jews. That's the exact same thing white slave owners said about freeing the slaves. Mm-hmm. If you free them, they're gonna kill us all.
Yeah.
So it's like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? And so I'm wondering, in what degrees, what do you see that's happening today, and what would you say to people who dismiss these protests? Did you feel dismissed when you were protesting?
To a certain degree by the cops themselves. I mean, they were quoted as, and they're still quoted as, thinking of us as spoiled brats. It's very difficult to think about the fact that there are Palestinians that were born and grew up in Israel. There were.
It's all that they know, right?
Yeah, and it's, or thinking of the people that were demonstrating as being naive and not having any life experience. I had some life experience, and there were other people there too that had some life experience. To make those kinds of generalizations or stereotypes is real.
Yeah. And you know what? Even though most college kids are spoiled, sensitive brats, anybody who will throw themselves in front of a police baton, good for you. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to be critical or criticize you, being like, actually, I think you should do it this way. It's like, if you're going to throw your body on the gears of this evil machine in any way, God bless. Even the January 6ers, I don't begrudge them. I have nothing but respect for the January 6ers, because for 4 years, Democrats complained about Trump being the end of the world. This guy was going to fucking destroy the world. And what did they do? They didn't do shit.
Yeah, nothing.
They didn't do shit. So as well, anybody, any Democrat who's like, I don't agree with the property damage, fuck you, dude. Yeah, go fuck yourself. Yeah. So, I mean, if you could give advice to the current protesters, what would it be?
Keep at it.
Just don't stop.
Yeah, don't stop.
So I don't know, any closing thoughts? Anything you wanted to add?
I think there are a lot of sort of weird parallels. I mean, one of the things that Columbia students were bitching about was the university putting people out of their homes in order to take over their buildings. And it's just, I mean, you think of the settlers putting in the what's
the West Bank.
The West Bank.
Yeah.
Putting out the Palestinians in order to take over the property with Netanyahu's blessing is kind of the same thing. It's just taking over because you can, I
didn't realize this, that the original protest was about these Pentagon funds, the classified information. I mean, the main demand of these college students is to divest from economic support of Israel. So there's that's a significant parallel right there too.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, there were some divestiture. Well, there have been a lot of those, but that was one of the main goals, to stop with the secret research.
And so you guys were called probably commies. There's a lot of McCarthyism going on.
Yeah.
And now, instead of calling people commies, they still do, but the word now is anti-Semite.
Yeah.
Calling someone an anti-Semite is their way of dismissing you without any real critical thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I sometimes I don't know how you get around that. How you get around the desire to say that or label somebody that way, because it's easy and because it's it's looking for sympathy for your cause, and I don't know how you can say to someone who feels that they want to protest against what Israel is doing, therefore feels that you're an anti-Semite. How do you argue with that? There's not really much you can do.
Because there's no arguing. I mean, it is a disingenuous, insincere talking point.
Yeah.
And the second you start to try to explain why it's not anti-Semitism, you've already lost.
Yeah.
The point is just to be like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know?